in about 3 days from Saturday, we'll have the narrative machine crank up and start talking about how the SEC needs 12 automatic bids to the playoff.
Of course.
This is the weekend. This is the weekend where it starts, guys. It is a travesty that South Carolina, Texas, whatever, can't be in here. Did y'all know Indiana has a football team?
This is the College Football Enquirer. I am Andy Staples here with Ross Dellenger and Steven Godfrey. And I will remind you that if you'd like to see us on video, turn on your smart TV, look at those home row icons, click on the Yahoo Sports Network, and there we will be, along with all the other excellent Yahoo Sports Network shows. If you would like to watch us anytime, day or night, wherever you are, on a tablet, on a phone, you name it, yahoosports.tv, available 24/7, 365, yahoosports.tv. You can watch the College Football Enquirer and all of the other excellent Yahoo shows. I will actually be on Yahoo Sports Daily on Wednesday, so you can watch me there. Guys, what a week we've got. We've got conflict in the SEC, on the field, off the field in terms of, will these coaches be in okay situations after the games are over? And also at the network with Paul Finebaum?
Can't be.
We'll get
drama.
We'll get to the Finebaum stuff. We'll get to the Finebaum stuff later. But let's talk about this on the field portion of this, because it's interesting that the sexiest game is probably Alabama-Missouri, because it's two teams that have playoff aspirations. Both are playing really well. Alabama coming off wins against Georgia and Vanderbilt. Missouri's still undefeated. But it's probably not the juiciest game. Like, the juiciest game, at least the way I look at these things, is where's the game where the losing fan base is falling off a cliff? The answer to that is Baton Rouge.
Yeah,
in Baton
baby.
Rouge, if South Carolina loses a year where they thought they were going to go to the playoff, they will be out of the playoff mix in week 2 of October. Meanwhile, if LSU loses, they will not be out of the playoff, but that will be the moment where 100% of the fan base turns on Brian Kelly. That's a juicy game, boys.
Yeah, there's a couple of them too, right? There's one in Auburn I'm sure we'll get to as well, where like either one of the fan bases lose and it's fire the coach immediately, where we stink. But this one in Baton Rouge is certainly one, and obviously all eyes, I feel like, are on one of the storylines of the beginning of the first 6 weeks of the season, which is what's going on with Garrett Nussmeier. Is he hurt? How hurt is he? And he's one of, we talked about it in the show, I think Godfrey brought it up, he's one of the top maybe 6 or top 5 preseason Heisman quarterback sort of guys that are not playing very well, right, or as well as we all thought they were playing. So, I mean, the latest we got from Brian Kelly, I think last week, was Garrett Nussmeier has a abdominal injury, but it's not the core.
It's the obliques.
I thought the abdominal was in the core.
Aren't the obliques part of the core? I'm not a doctor.
I thought so.
So what they're doing, what they're doing, and this is not me reporting. Ross is the reporter. This is me. I'm the dirtbag who texts people. So what they're doing now is very similar to the NHL. Upper body injury, lower body injury, and they're obfuscating on purpose. It's an oblique injury. I've had about 3 people who work in strength and conditioning text me about this, watching him play. He made some poor decisions throwing the ball, especially against Ole Miss. Like, his oblique has nothing to do with like, oh, the safety rolled that way and you threw it that way anyway. You can tell by the trajectory of the ball and the lack of speed, just so the ball's inability to get there quickly. He doesn't have torque. This happens in baseball a lot. It happens to the best athletes in baseball when they pull up on a check swing. Happens to catchers a lot for reasons you can sort of understand the way you'd rotate your body. I have a question. I'm looking it up right now. So informed here as a college football head. Who's their backup? And is he the worst quarterback in Division I football? Because the insistence on riding with this dude when your run game sucks all year has been a basic question that Brian Kelly has exploded at, and it's probably going to cost him a season, or the season they expected.
They've got Michael Van Buren, who played at Mississippi State last year.
That is a fratty name.
I don't know that he'd be, because they also have Colin Hurley, who was a blue chip recruit out of Jacksonville. reclassified. He's very young still. He's been at LSU over a year now, but he's very young still. I don't know who they'd go to. Like, I think it might be one of those situations, Ross, and you tell me, is this one of those where maybe Van Buren's the guy you go to for the rest of a game and Hurley's the guy you go to if it's the rest of a season? Something like that?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Van Buren's been right over because they had a bye week last week, I believe, right? They had an off week.
Yes.
And I think Van Buren, Gunn Nussmeier, I saw just reports out of Baton Rouge. Nussmeier didn't do much at all, I guess, during the bye week, trying to heal up from the oblique.
Yep.
And Van Buren was taking, the first team, or most of the first team, if not all of the first team, I believe. And I think Brian Kelly said that he looked really good and stuff. And so, I guess he would be the guy, it sounds like. But you're right, Andy. They've got a really good freshman sort of right there waiting.
Yeah, it's one of those deals. Colin Hurley had the car accident, but he's recovered now from that. So I think that they have other options. And it's interesting because the LSU situation and the Texas situation feel somewhat similar, although
I don't know.
Garrett Nussmeier's got more of he definitely has an injury. Arch Manning, Stark said he had like a shoulder stinger, but they've been very adamant that he's fine. It's not a long-term thing. But yeah, Godfrey, you're right about the injury itself and the rotation, rotation required to throw a football hard and throw it a long way down the field. It's not the same as throwing 104 miles an hour in baseball, but it's close. And
absolutely,
if you have an injury to that area, it does make it much harder to do that. So it's crazy. Guys, I was watching Steve Sarkisian's press conference before the Oklahoma game. That's the other one, Texas-Oklahoma. Texas could be out of the playoff as well. That's the other big, crazy game in the SEC where somebody's going off a cliff if they lose. Oklahoma, they'll be fine because they'll say, okay, Mateer can play. Texas, they will not be fine if they lose this game. They will be out of the playoff. They're not making the playoff because they have one of the easier draws in the SEC. So if they lose a second SEC game, I just don't see how they're going to have any shot.
Which means in about 3 days from Saturday, we'll have the narrative machine crank up and start talking about how the SEC needs 12 automatic bids to the playoff.
Of course.
This is the weekend. This is the weekend where it starts, guys. This is where you're going to see our friends over at a particular cable network run as state media and college sports next week just be like, it is a travesty that South Carolina, Texas, whatever, can't be in here. Did y'all know Indiana has a football team?
That's going to be really hard if Indiana beats Oregon, by the way.
Shout out to my friends in Charlotte.
I do the top 10 every week, and I think I have Indiana at number 5 or 6, which is behind or ahead of several SEC teams, including Texas A&M and Ole Miss. And let's just say I've heard from some folks in the Southeastern footprint. That I have the Hoosiers.
Bunch of socialists, they play basketball.
Andy, this Oklahoma Tech, this Red River game, one of the things, I think we talked about it, last week a little bit, was the mulligan. Does the committee give them sort of a mulligan if they're competitive, right? If they get blown out by 30 points, I don't know that a mulligan
if Oklahoma's competitive without Mateer, that's kind of the one case where the committee might come in and say, yeah, okay, we're all right with you losing that game, and you could have 3 losses. The other thing about Oklahoma's schedule is it's harder than Texas's schedule. Even though Texas played Ohio State out of conference, Oklahoma played Michigan, and then Oklahoma's SEC draw was just considerably more difficult than Texas's SEC draw. So, Oklahoma is facing a gauntlet after Texas. Yeah. It doesn't really get any easier for Oklahoma. So, if they were to, let's say, they lose this game close, Mateer comes back, they drop a couple more, whether it's like Alabama, LSU, we'll see. But I think they might get some grace from the committee in that particular case. That might be the one exception, but also because of that schedule. I think that's the other piece of it.
If you're going to, I started saying this, I realize I'm saying it and repeating this. If you're going to spend some losses in the SEC, which you're probably going to spend 1 or 2 losses, you really want to keep them in your pocket with the back end, Andy. So I feel like it is still a must win. I don't think that they could exit this with a loss and make the playoff, to be honest. And I really like everything they're doing. It's just that If you have a loss here, you have the South Carolina road game, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Alabama, Missouri, LSU.
Yes.
So,
Again,
man, that
this
feels
is
like
the
three.
hardest stretch of the season anybody has to play.
Absolutely. So, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I do lean towards the fact they do have to win this weekend. And they, by the way, they got to feel really good about this based off of last week. The worst thing for Texas, the absolute worst thing would be to go against this defense and say, my quarterback is having a processing and decision-making problem against this defense, against Brent Venables. This is fantastic for the Sooners, which is why Texas will win by 17.
That is how this game goes.
It always does, yeah.
I covered a Red River game, Max, last year. Oklahoma was so much better than Texas. I want to say they were probably like 12-point favorites in the game, and Texas just bombed them. Texas just crushed them. And Texas
Andy,
wasn't good the rest of the year.
I committed the cardinal sin of Ross, you talked about this, where you go and you're like, I know what I'm going to write. And I covered a Red River one year where I'm like, all right, I'm going to do Charlie Strong's epitaph. And then like it's like the SpongeBob meme. It's like 3 hours later, and then I'm standing next to Charlie wearing that damn hat, and I was like, God, I'm gonna rewrite everything.
And then Kansas happened. But yes, that's how this game tends to go. But I'm fascinated because I was at this game last year, and it was embarrassing for Oklahoma. It was so sad watching them try to play offense against Texas with a bad offensive line, with no healthy receivers. Michael Hawkins Jr. was the starting quarterback at the time. It was so ugly. And so it's hard for me to get that out of my mind, even though I know it's the same quarterback who will be playing behind a much better offensive line, who will be playing with much better receivers. And that defense is going to help Oklahoma because, listen, as good as Florida was against Texas, I think Oklahoma's pass rush is probably even better.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think Oklahoma and A&M.
Yeah, Oklahoma's pass rush might be the best in the country, right? I mean, I'm in Columbus, Ohio right now, and up here with Ohio State. Defensively, I think those are probably the top in the country. And like Godfrey said, yeah, I mean, A&M is not too bad either.
Right. And that's one sticking out there. A&M gets Florida coming off the Texans. See, it's weird because this is one of their. It feels like there's a week every year where every SEC game has a juicy storyline, and this one is not necessarily juicy for A&M because if they just keep winning, great, then everything's going the way it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Florida, if they win, the miracle run continues. The Florida fans freak out because then it becomes more real that Billy Napier might get kept. But if A&M wins, then the clock starts ticking again on Billy Napier. And so that game is going to be fascinating. But I want to go to the one in Auburn. There's a clip of Hugh Freeze talking about how quickly Kirby Smart got Georgia to the national title game. And it was so funny because Hugh Freeze, of course, has spent the entirety of his time at Auburn just crapping all over the Brian Harsin product that he inherited and making it sound like you need 10 years to actually become good. And so he says, how long did it take for Kirby to get to the national title game? Was it, year 3, year 4? And one of the reporters goes, it was year 2. And he's like, well, that's not right. That can't be right.
Yeah.
That's typical Freeze. It's also funny to me because you think about how fast he built in Oxford, doing it a slightly different way than you're allowed to. But think about how fast he built there versus what he's done in Auburn as well. It's even playing field and personnel acquisition is a little tough for Hugh.
Hate to kind of go off the field here, but it does involve the Auburn Tigers.
Yes.
I don't know if you guys saw
yes, please. I'm glad you mentioned this, Ross.
Next year, they're moving their game with Baylor to Atlanta as a way to sort of generate NIL, like quote real NIL for their athletes, which it's something like Godfrey, what's the basketball tournament? The players.
I have no idea.
Well, Andy, the basketball tournament
I know which
NIL,
one you're talking about. I'm blanking on the name, but yes.
Dang it.
Yes, it is.
But anyway,
it's designed for the players to get paid. Yes.
Right. And Auburn's been thinking about this all off season, trying like creative ways to we can. And I'd heard back in probably June or so, May or June, they were thinking about doing this where the players basically will get paid from the Aflac kickoff money, like a neutral site game money that usually goes to athletic departments. Now that neutral game money is in a sense going to go to the roster because the players are going to promote and market the game. Players era. Thank you, TJ. The players era sort of series.
They're going to market the game by playing in the game. Also, I guess they're probably going to send out some Instagram posts.
Which, by the way, is very similar to the old kind of Missouri. Missouri started it. I think University of Missouri started it with the NIL like about 2-3 years ago, is players promoting the foundation where the school's foundation where they were getting the money, which now is actually deemed to not be sort of it's prohibited, I think, but it's not prohibited.
I love how you call it the old thing when it was. You called it the old thing when it was 3 years ago.
3 years ago.
That's right. But it's kind of a fascinating situation with Auburn because the local fans, you guys understand this, a lot of fans there in Auburn, not happy you're moving a game out of Jordan Hare.
Was there not a game in Atlanta scheduled for 26?
Well, they probably just moved it around because they can play one on Friday. They can play one on because they've had it where they've played a Friday game, a Saturday game, and a Sunday game. So, like this year, they played a Saturday and a Sunday game. I went to the Sunday game. It was South Carolina Virginia Tech. Right. So they have some flexibility there.
It doesn't look like they did, or if they did, I can't find it. That's interesting.
Here's the thing. I hate this because I hate when they move games off campus. I get why Auburn needs to do it. Also, Ross, to take it back to the field, if you have maybe an unplanned expense all of a sudden and you need a new revenue stream,
don't encourage this university. This university, above all others in college sports, don't encourage this one to find creative new ways to fund a buyout. This school invented cobbling together cash quickly to burn somebody.
I want to point this out because
very true.
So if Hugh Freeze were to get fired,
hypothetically,
based on the salary he's already been paid for this season and kind of where it would happen in this season, although
bad.
Look, it could happen after this game. I'm not kidding. Like if he loses to Georgia, he's 0-3 in the SEC. They lost to Vandy and Missouri last year. Those games are coming up. You still got the Iron Bowl coming up. Like you've already probably tanked this season at that point because this is a season they thought 8 games was the floor. 8 wins was the floor.
Yeah. Here's the thing about I was talking to somebody, a couple people over there over the last couple of days, and they're not scoring points. Which
Isn't
is
kind of his thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it is his thing, and it's a thing that usually, even when you're losing, keeps fans engaged and excited when you score points. And when you're scoring 10 points and 17 points, and even against South Alabama, 31 points, like there's a problem there, and there's some serious restlessness going on. And it's not like it gets any easier, right? I mean, they got Missouri the next week. So this could be a pretty big 2-week stretch here where it feels like they have to go 2-0, and they certainly can't go 0-2.
When they certainly could go 0-2, and that's the issue.
Yeah,
this particular game, Georgia can't get pressure on the quarterback. Jackson Arnold holds the ball too long. So what will decide this game is
something must give.
That's right.
Something has to give.
Is what will decide this game is whether Georgia gets pressure because Jackson Arnold won't get rid of the ball, or whether Jackson Arnold has time to throw because Georgia doesn't get pressure. Like that's the paradox of this game.
That's a great way to market this, Andy. I feel like in the TV ads this week, coverage sacks.
It's either coverage sacks or bombs to Cam Coleman. I don't know which one it will be, but it's going to be one of those two things.
They need more of the latter for sure. Absolutely. He is a phenomenal player in an otherwise broken offense, which feels like that's an award that's more interesting to me than the Heisman. Like best player on a doomed offense.
Nice.
Dallas Wilson, the Florida freshman, maybe vying for that.
That's a good one.
We got a lot of candidates. We could do a whole segment.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God! But so it's interesting the buyout. So the buyout would be about $15 million. It's payable over time. It's not a super tough buyout to pay, which is crazy to talk about because $15 million is still a whole lot of money. And I want to point out, even though we've had all these different numbers thrown around and we talked about all these different buyouts, Auburn still is number 2 in college sports history in terms of buyout paid. The Gus Malzahn buyout is still number 2 behind Jimbo. Obviously, Jimbo is the highest. It probably isn't going to get eclipsed anytime soon.
Yeah.
But the Gus one from 5 years ago is still sitting at number 2. And based on who's going to get fired this year, might still be sitting at number 2.
I wrote a long...
I mean, what was Gus's again?
20.5. So Billy Napier
that was a big deal at the time.
20.1.
Yeah, that was a big deal at the time.
Yeah.
I wrote a very long piece about this when it was in the works, when it was about to happen, going back through the chronology of his deal at Auburn. And he had some of the most expensive wins for a university that I've ever seen. What I mean by that is, do you know where I'm going with this, Andy?
In the loser leaves town match? Yes.
Beating Les Miles. And then the one that really just absolutely crushes Auburn, at least in the wallet, is beating Kirby. Is the year that they go in and play Georgia in the SEC championship, where they're reworking that deal, Andy, essentially matching Kirby's Georgia contract, because they're both at CAA. I mean, like it was a classic Queen's Gambit from one James Sexton, and so they basically give Gus Kirby money for beating Georgia, only for them to turn around, get smoked by Georgia, and then
they did win the
begins.
Iron Bowl in the 2 weeks between. So
right. So it was pretty much a perfect, Gus Malzahn made some money in 2 weeks in 2017 at Auburn's expense.
Yeah. And so now Hugh Freeze, who didn't have a lot of leverage coming in. That's the difference. Like Brian Kelly, he could lose this week. He could lose a couple more. Doesn't matter. He ain't going anywhere. Mark Stoops, his buyout is $30-something million due immediately. That ain't happening.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
one,
Ross.
Andy, is the one in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yes.
Man, if they eat that.
Tell me about that.
That would be
one.
around 30.
If they
I think that would be around 30 million, 28 to 30 million, I believe.
I don't see it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just saying I don't see it.
I don't see it either, but what if they don't win another game this season? And that is, if you look at their schedule, we talked about Oklahoma's schedule, Wisconsin's schedule is that hard. Like it really might happen.
What if they get $100 million from a private equity firm as well?
I do want to point out, Andy, you mentioned
that'd be an
this really
incredibly
fast.
stupid use of that money, but sure.
Yeah, they do it all the time.
Andy pointed this out really fast, and I get a lot of questions about buyouts on the various shows that I appear on. So for those of you not in the business, the reason why we're talking somewhat in kind of a glib nature about the Freeze buyout, it's not the dollar amount. Andy mentioned this. It's how much you're owed immediately and how much that they can disperse over time. Yeah. And Andy also said, hey, Freeze did not come to the table with a lot of leverage coming from Liberty, essentially still on a rehab tour post-scandal. He is not owed any percentage of that money within X days. The reason, what really hurts about Jimbo, what really hurt about Gus, and there's another deal from last year where they had someone.
Well, Billy Napier is a 50% up front. So if Florida were to fire Billy Napier this year, it's $10 million up front.
Yeah, so if you talk to people inside these athletic departments, or even some of the people who generously chip in to pay someone's tab to get them to leave the bar, if you will, it's that percentage owed immediately within 30, 60, 90 that really hurts. The rest of it just sort of becomes a line item in your monthly budget. Line item,
right.
Yeah, Texas A&M
you always hear that
someone.
Line item,
Yeah, it's just a line item. But it's like a $1.4 million line item. Who cares?
It's a giant second mortgage. Yeah, it's a giant
I saw the one at LSU.
Mortgage. That's what it is.
It literally said less on the athletic budget.
Less on the the line
before he
item.
got Kansas, where it was just no one was happier than LSU's football department when Les got Kansas.
Oh, Jeff Long, thank you for providing us with so much entertainment. All right, gentlemen. Speaking of entertainment, when we come back, they're supposed to entertain us by being entertaining on television, but now they're entertaining us by arguing behind the scenes. What is going on with Paul Finebaum and ESPN? We'll talk about it when we come back. All right, gentlemen, now we go deep into the weeds of the business because a very interesting story came out on Monday about Paul Finebaum and ESPN. Now, this came from Clay Travis of Outkick, who, he's former sports writer turned political commentator, but still dips his toe in the sports world every once in a while. And so
a good description. I was wondering where that was going. Yeah, it was good though. It was good, Andy. Okay. Yes. Yeah. It was very accurate.
Interestingly enough, Clay had a story with Paul, a sit-down interview with Paul Finebaum a couple weeks ago. Paul Finebaum hosts the Paul Finebaum Show on the SEC Network, but also appears on a variety of ESPN shows throughout the week talking about college football. And, kind of the mouthpiece of the SEC, but also, he's a pot stirrer and has been for years. Did it before he worked for ESPN when he had his own syndicated radio show in Alabama. So Paul goes on with Clay and talks about potentially running for Senate in Alabama, reveals his political affiliations for the first time in over 40 years of public life. It was all very calculated. And so Clay puts out a story on Monday pointing out that Paul has not appeared on big ESPN, on the big ESPN shows that he normally would. Like he would have a Sports Center hit here. He would have a First Take hit here. He would have a Get Up appearance here. And that he hadn't had any of those really since this happened. And now he was still doing his SEC Network show. He still did the SEC pregame show on the SEC Network on Saturday. He still did the digital stuff with Matt Berry, but had not appeared on big ESPN. And Bill Hoffheimer, the publicist for ESPN, the PR guy, comes out, this is false, categorically. It's not false, though. Like, it's true. He's not been appearing. And as we record this, we don't know if he's going to make his Tuesday First Take appearance. And if he doesn't, I think that's pretty telling. But something's up, guys. Something's up.
Ross, you want to go first before I start screaming?
Well, when he was it last week or the week before? Whenever he did mention about the Senate run, it was last week, right? Yeah. And right when he said that, I thought, when you say something like that publicly, you probably know that there are repercussions, right, for that, number one, and number two, you probably know what you're really going to do already. And it sounds like that the congressional, the run to DC is a serious one. And I know Paul's always been fairly interested in politics. It seems like every time I'm on the show, he asks me about politics as living in DC. And so I feel like that we may see this happen. From ESPN's standpoint, I guess I could understand that they don't want to be used as some political platform, but
they don't seem to mind it for Stephen A, though.
I was just about to say it wouldn't be the first time, Yeah.
Okay. Now, Stephen A hasn't actually done anything, and given how much Stephen A makes doing his various shows for ESPN, I don't know that he would want to leave to go into politics now. It does seem like the Paul thing is more serious. For those who don't know, Paul would want to run as a Republican for the Senate in Alabama. This is the seat that Tommy Tuberville currently holds. Tommy Tuberville is supposed to be, after this term, running for governor of Alabama. I know way too much about this particular Alabama Senate seat because I wrote a big story on Tuberville when he was exploring running for it. But put it this way, Paul, very calculated to come out with Clay Travis, who has a predominantly Republican audience. Paul would obviously be running for the Republican nomination. You will not win this seat if you're a Democrat. Doug Jones, a Democrat, held this seat before Tuberville. We will not get into why that is, but let's just say it was a once in a generation situation that's not going to happen again.
Why not?
The previous holder of it might have had some problems with involving underage something or other. So
okay, yeah. So you've asked me before, Andy, to insert professional wrestling whenever possible. Okay,
please do.
Here we go. Yeah,
we understand what a work is. Right, we understand what like a fabricated.
Actually, we understand what a work is. Let's tell the audience what
the most people don't.
That
probably,
means when something is created to look real that is in actuality predetermined. I would strongly encourage anyone to stay away from the idea that this is some sort of First Amendment issue, or that this is some sort of freedom of speech issue, or start comparing this to Jimmy Kimmel and what went on with the Nexstar Sinclair mergers and all. This is not any of that. This is Fugazi. This is a well-calculated plan by one media individual to potentially make a career transition amongst what might be some internal tension with his very large, very powerful employer. That's it, and that's all. This is not the grassroots freedom of speech issue. This is very, very calculated and done in a way to position one individual as a potential victim and someone who is on the side of the people. And look what the corporate media has done to us. You can choose to believe that or not. That's fine.
See, I have my own conspiracy theory about this.
Which is?
That this would allow Paul to reorganize if he didn't want to do run for the Senate, which I still think if you don't do the Clay Travis interview and all that, if you aren't seriously considering politics.
Right.
So I don't think that's...
Yeah, I don't think he's half-cocked,
real.
Andy. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, but if you wanted a backup plan to that, if you work at ESPN right now and you have your own kind of franchise, you're looking at Pat McAfee and going, wait a second. Why do I have to listen to these people and he doesn't? Oh, because they don't own his show. They license his show. They pay him to simulcast his show, but he owns it. And so if they were to try to do anything to him, he's just going to be like, okay, you can't simulcast my show anymore. Tough titties. And that's the thing that if you're Paul, like you had a syndicated radio show for over 20 years. You could have that apparatus up and running in 24 hours.
Yes.
And license your show to ESPN or whoever. So
I would agree with all that. I think this is again, this is a little bit of chess that uses the sort of the transparency of public life as a tool. And I don't think anyone's being honest here. This is a lot of positioning. This is building political points. I would just encourage everyone to look at this as scripted and somewhat farcical in the way that they're trying to represent Paul right now. Now, he has not said anything as of this recording.
Said nothing on his show yesterday, because remember, he's still doing his SEC Network show. Somebody called in and tried to ask about it. They immediately booted that person from the air.
Yeah. So maybe we revisit this if he comes out and kind of and plays this up with a particular public posture. But as of now, this is I wouldn't call it a non-story, but it's definitely an industry story. And I think it does lean more towards a potential political run and or, as Andy's alluded to, maybe an attempt at reorganizing yourself professionally in the media industry. I would, again, just really overemphasize this is not about freedom of the press or expression or any of that. He's being vilified or ESPN's out to get him. That has nothing to do with this.
Well, it'd be one thing if they pulled him completely off the air. That would have made it one of those issues. It is a little weird that they did it this way, because I don't think anybody would have noticed or cared had he been on First Take or had he been on Get Up. Like, we only noticed because he wasn't on.
I don't consume any of the shows we're talking about. So his absence, I didn't know, Ross. I don't know if
me neither.
I mean,
no, me neither.
Yeah, like I had no idea, and I wouldn't
but
really.
It's one of those things that if they'd slipped him into one of those shows and just taken him off the other ones, like no Sports Center hits, but you're going to do one First Take hit.
Yeah,
nobody would have said anything.
Get Up doesn't have a ton of college content on there a lot. I see it on it's a classic TV show that's on mute when you're in the gym or waiting room or getting your tires rotated or something like that. I wouldn't watch First Take at gunpoint, so I'm not the target audience here. I know that he's kind of come on just to sort of be a foil to Scream the way, like, was it Chris Russo?
You know they're the same show, right, Godfrey?
What every show on ESPN is the same show. It's the giant hollow box in between.
I get them all confused,
in between trying
they're all the same.
Yeah, you're just trying to pay for all of the rights fees that they've tallied up, and screaming at each other in a colorful box is the only programming strategy they've had for the last 5 years.
The only time I turn my TV on is to watch live sports. Like, that's the only time I ever turn my TV on.
That's it, and that's all.
I think that's ESPN's dilemma right now. I think that's what they're transitioning to, because Paul's show is a big-time innings eater.
Oh, yeah.
On linear television. 3 hours a day on linear television that it takes up on the SEC network. But the thing is, the SEC network exists to show live games, to force cable operators and by extension the customer to pay more for those live games. So, especially now in this environment, I don't know about you guys, I don't just channel surf. I don't turn on my TV unless I know what I'm going to watch.
Correct.
So the linear stuff really doesn't move the needle nearly as much.
Man. Yeah, it's dying out. I'll be fascinated if where Paul thinks he can position himself in the media if this does change, Andy, because
but the thing is, Paul is actually uniquely. Paul is built for this era of media. He was built for this era of media 40 years before it existed. Like when he was an attack dog columnist for the Mobile Press Register, he was built for this era of media.
Yes.
So like,
but
he
Andy,
was a YouTuber before they existed.
And his product was so, I don't mind saying this, and I guess I should say I'm not allowed on that show anymore, and I'm on a list with a couple of our colleagues that I don't appear on SEC Network programming, so I guess you can call this bias. No, I mean, it's fine. I would say some of our colleagues that aren't allowed, but I would let them do that. I don't want to get anybody mad or whatever. But so with some bias, I'll say this. Paul Finebaum's show before he was on the SEC Network was a uniquely cultural institution in the South. It was so far ahead of the dialogue, as Andy says, in the message board era, in the podcast era, and whatever it is that we define ourselves as now. It really was appointment listening. It has fallen off of that because he is house media now. He works for the institution. And I have seen on the few times I did go on the SEC Network show, the strain and sort of the walls that he bumps into working for the institution that he used to absolutely pillory. Andy, you remember?
The thing is, like,
you can kind of
when you see him go after Lincoln Riley now, he used to do that with the SEC, with the SEC coaches, with the SEC ADs. He's much more careful about that. Yeah, he's much more careful about that now. But you're right. That part of him you can't do. And the history of that is when they were creating the SEC Network, the thought was, okay, we're going to have some nice, benign, programming. And Mike Slive, the commissioner of the SEC at the time, was like, no, we need something interesting. So he had to go to various SEC presidents and convince them to let ESPN hire Paul Finebaum for this job. But there were still some concessions that had to be made on Paul's side, where you don't attack the monolith. And that's another example.
That's another example of Slive's vision exceeding anyone in the current office, because they would so much rather cut Paul's balls off, or just get rid of him completely now and turn that thing into infotainment 24/7 for the SEC.
He's
like nobody wants what Slive wanted.
He's been, though, like when you look at the last few years, he's been a little more spicier than I would expect somebody who works sort of for the network, right? Remember the stuff obviously the stuff with Lane, but remember the stuff a couple years ago with Nick? The stuff with Nick, he like really ticked off Nick. That was the whole like drama.
Yeah, but
in general,
that wasn't a work.
Some of that feels. No. The irritation on Nick's part was definitely real.
Is worked.
Oh, I think the Lane stuff might work.
Don't get me started.
The Lane stuff lately has been a little too good.
I can't use
maybe a little too good.
Yeah,
I can't use the adjectives and nouns that I would like to in regard to the ESPN coverage of Lane Kiffin. We'll call it a glow up. We'll call it that. I'll leave it at that. No, I think even by comparison, though, Ross, when he had friction with Saban at the height of the sort of second Saban reign at Alabama, the title run, it pales in comparison to the way he used to take stakeholders to task. And one of the things I admired about Paul was the extreme honesty and absolute dedication to transparency as how ugly the fandom in the South could be. Fandom fanatics, Latin derivation. And all of that got lost in the wash when the SEC turned around, co-opted the phrase "it just means more," which used to have a much more negative connotation, and kind of just whitewashed it. And so if Paul, I'll say this, regardless of employers, anybody here, Yahoo, or any of the other gigs that we have, if he went and left the SEC/ESPN and went back out as independent media, I certainly would start listening again, because I think he does still have his teeth.
It would be burn it all down radio and
I love that.
YouTube, I guess, at that point. But the other
maybe
part
we'll
of this
get there.
is like, what if he actually is going into politics? Like, you think these current politicians say some ridiculous things like,
oh my God,
Paul's better at it professionally than they
better.
are.
Yeah, he's better. He's smarter in a lot of ways. Watch him craft some kind of like opening address to a rally. Look out.
Oh God. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm ready for this. Like I don't think I can wrap my brain around this, but it may be happening. It may be real.
If it is happening, then we're going to see him move very tactically in the short term into a freedom of expression, First Amendment rights, like feigned outrage pretty quickly. Like the idea that, if he himself starts pushing, and he might be doing this off the record through sources now, but if he starts pushing this idea that he's been silenced and it's a First Amendment issue, that is the conservative playbook 101 here. So I wouldn't. We'll find out pretty soon.
Yeah, Disney and ESPN are a really easy target for this sort of thing.
Yeah.
In both directions, as you saw the backlash to what they did to, with Jimmy Kimmel. So they've gotten it from the left and the right. So they're an easy target. Everybody hates Mickey Mouse until they give him $150 for a ticket and then $150 more for the fast pass, and we won't even get into that. But
let it out. I've been there. It's the only way to get on Tron. You can't get on Tron without a fast pass.
Not a theme park guy. All right, we'll see what happens here. But it's going to be fascinating. But I think you're right. And if he is actually going into politics, and this winds up in one of those messy divorces from ESPN that we've seen, like with Bill Simmons and some of these other people, he may be willing to not sign anything, because I think at this point, it's not like ESPN's going to pay him to go away because he's under contract. So that means there's probably not going to be a non-disparagement agreement, and he could just, if he's going into politics after this and this ends badly, he will blowtorch ESPN, and that will be highly entertaining.
Yeah,
at center of his
the thing you need to look for.
Campaign.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly. I'm serious. That's what you need to look for if you're listening to this or watching this. Don't think about what they're saying. Think about when and why and how. That's how you see through this thing. It's all about positioning.
All about it. Positioning is a great term to use, Steven Godfrey.
Come on, give me that segue.
Because when we come back, we're going to talk about how the Group of Five programs are positioned in the new world of college football. And for the most part, it ain't good. Some sad hipster college football radio with Steven Godfrey when we return. We are back with the College Football Enquirer. Me and Steven Godfrey. Ross had to catch a flight, but Godfrey has been stewing in his own.
He just didn't want to talk about the G5
this topic for. I don't think that's
Ross just didn't want to talk G5. He's got to be able to talk to Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, and can't be entertaining the little people. No, can't be sullying himself with the Sun Belt.
I do think this is a conversation we need to have, because we've talked about how the NIL era and the transfer portal era, they have flattened the curve in the SEC. They flattened the curve in the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten, and I think the SEC is deeper in the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten, in the next 5 to 7 years, you will see the Minnesotas of the world, and we'll see what happens at Wisconsin. But those types of programs are going to get deeper too. They're going to get better. They're going to get more competitive because they have way more money than they used to. That said, some of the Group of Five programs or former Power Five programs that are now Group of Six programs, I don't. My terms are all jumbled now, but they're in bad shape and potentially getting worse.
There are good Group of Five programs. I want to start off. I'm not writing the obituary for the entire classification. In fact, on the next show, Andy,
half the Americans are great right now.
Absolutely, we're going to talk about a really good North Texas South Florida game that's going to have playoff potential or impact. I mean, really, kind of a loser leaves town. It's not that the Group of Five is dead. I think that there are fewer opportunities at the Group of Five classification. And by the way, let me start this whole thing off by saying we haven't even gotten to the cascade effect of 9-game conference scheduling at the power level, because someone's going to lose out, and it's going to be cheaper and smarter, by the way. Let's just pull a random SEC team for a second. So if I'm South Carolina or something,
right?
Why would I keep a game against an American team that's going to take me from pillar to post and try and win that game? And we're coming off of some brutal 2-game, 3-game conference schedule. We got to go. We got 4 ahead of us. No, you're going to go and schedule the Citadel. Yeah, you're going to go schedule the Citadel, or you're going to go schedule some other FCS opponent that you can basically treat as a scrimmage and a get-right game or a health game for your roster. So the Group of Five is about to suffer even more because of the revenue that they'll lose for taking those paycheck games. And then they're getting killed in the portal. The problem is right now, I think we're learning, right? 4 or 5 years into the portal, we're starting to understand what works, what doesn't. Contextually, we talked about Florida State last week on kind of both the how to complement your roster in the portal and then how to kill your roster in the portal, right? And if you over rely on one, okay, the back end, the part we don't talk about, is that some of these rosters are getting absolutely rated in a way that there's no real way to recover from. And I think that's what you're seeing in programs right now, like Oregon State. We can talk about in a second, Andy. I don't know if you want to go there, but that has more to do with the Pac-12's demise and the fact they're kind of on an island.
I'll give you a very practical example. I'm in Mobile right now. I spoke to the First and 10 Club last night, and I was talking to somebody from South Alabama, and I said, might have been better off for Gio Lopez, the quarterback from South Alabama last year, if he just stayed at South Alabama instead of going to North Carolina. He's already been benched at North Carolina.
Right.
He doesn't play with very good teammates relative to the competition. He's getting pounded when he does play. And they said, sure, but he made $2 million a year to go to North Carolina, so that he's not staying under those circumstances.
No.
But South Alabama has suffered as well because they lost their starting quarterback after spring practice. Major Applewhite and company had built stuff around Gio Lopez, and now they don't have him. And
imagine South Alabama, Andy. I was going to say, imagine South Alabama with Gio, but also with Fluff Bothwell, right? Who goes to Mississippi State.
He plays for Mississippi State. Yeah.
This story is being told. Some assistant in the MAC told me about this, and I want to say it was like Miami of Ohio in 2024 had a returning quarterback, a returning running back, a returning number one receiver that they had basically recruited out of high school, developed, felt really good coming out of freshman, sophomore year. They were ready to go into that upper class run, which is, by the way, I'm describing how MAC teams have worked for like the last 30 years. Build up a good class, make a run, the coach gets out. They lost all of those players to various Power 4, Power 5, whatever you want to call them, schools. And so you never can create momentum or experience in the roster. And so where this really bottoms out are programs that have kind of either proudly or sheepishly used the development label over the years, the group of five. Someone like, look, I say this a lot on the show, Chris Creighton hasn't forgotten how to coach football at Eastern Michigan. Okay?
Right.
But
Chris Creighton, the same guy who had Max Crosby. Yeah.
Yeah. But he's the guy, Andy, who relied heavily on taking a no-star and making him a 2-star, a 1-star, making him a 3-star over the course of 3 or 4 years, especially along the lines. I'm not trying to cast aspersions or denigrate these kids for getting money. I lobbied like you did for years for these guys to finally get paid. But if you're at Eastern Michigan and you put some good tape out your sophomore year, and some school calls and offers you whatever that dollar amount is, you're going to take it. You're going to leave. And the problem right now is that it's not working, and it doesn't cascade the way I think people are expecting, because some of these programs are not equipped financially to then turn around and pay maybe a high-level FCS kid to come up and take the place. That's the problem right now.
Also, if you're good enough in the FCS, then the power conference programs are paying that person.
Well, Division II quarterback starting at Ole Miss. You jump all the way up.
There's that, yes.
And there's such a stampede right now with some of the uncertainty about when the portal windows are going to open. What do we actually need to shop for? What do we need to brace against? Who do we need to brace for losing? In talking to a lot of group of five and high-level FCS assistants, no one can really forecast, which is something that drives football coaches insane. They want to be as calculated as possible. And so what you're seeing right now are some programs that had been pretty consistent over the years, developing an identity like Eastern Michigan, that are just sort of crushing out. Just like I don't really know how they're going to develop an identity.
Yeah, and it's strange because there are some that have managed. Like Jason Candle at Toledo has managed to keep a lot of his good players. Like Quinyon Mitchell, everybody knew about Quinyon Mitchell before his last year at Toledo. Like everybody. Yeah. Nick Saban admitted to trying to get him to. So imagine this. Quinyon Mitchell told Alabama no and stayed at Toledo.
Yeah. Like, on the draft broadcast. I mean, it was amazing. But guess what Toledo's doing? You know, when I call around on MAC coaches, Toledo has an NIL. Toledo,
Brian Blair, their
is
AD,
it a Big Ten NIL?
One of the best, and they raise money, and they're organized, and they know what they're doing.
Yeah, close to home. Derek Mason had an interesting time at Vanderbilt. I think Derek Mason suffered from being at Vanderbilt before Vanderbilt understood what it took to be successful in any context in the SEC. He's a great DC. Obviously, I'll never forget that Oregon-Stanford Thursday night game like 10 years ago now, where like he kind of solves Oregon. It was pretty impressive. He's at Middle Tennessee State right now, and they chose not to have it was like a different uniform set this season.
Yes,
pretty basic thing, just so they
they had
put
multiple
more money.
Uniforms, so they went back to the old ways of having a home uniform and an away uniform. And they're like, why are we spending all this money on alternate uniform? Who cares? And they put it toward NIL.
These are the kind of decisions you have to make at this level. And I think you're seeing programs right now really, really struggle on how do we do this? How do we remain relevant? Because we can't just pull together. Look, the TV revenue's not there for these schools. You can raise it in the community. And this is where programs like Boise are going to stand out as an aberration because it's so well run. It's well funded. They've had a series of very effective athletic directors. That's not what I'm talking about, right? There also is a success story this year, but Utah State is playing really good football, but that's because Bronco knows what he's doing. They have money that they want to spend relative to their level. It's just that I say this as someone who loves Maction, and I'm not a gambler. I'm not tuning in on Tuesday night for some weird parlay. I don't know, in talking to these assistants and these coaches in that league, I don't know if the MAC can survive the next 10 years. I don't know if some of these Sun Belt teams can survive the next 10 years.
I do think there's going to be a shrink. I think there's going to be a shrink over the next 10 years of the FBS. And, regardless of whether there's a super league or not, and we'll, that will figure itself out over the next 5 to 7 years. But I've said this all along, Steven, people don't like it when I say this, but not everybody needs to have big time college football. Sometimes you need to find your level and play there. Like, North Dakota State, everybody's like, well, how come they don't move up to the FBS? Because that would be stupid. No. They're perfect where they are. And it's okay.
I'll make it really...
It's okay if you're a good division, FCS program or a good Division II program. Like Ferris State's a good Division II program. Division III exists. Like all these people who say, well, this is killing college football and how are these programs supposed to do it if they can't, compete with the Alabamas and the Michigans of the world? Guys, don't pretend Division III doesn't exist. It exists. Right. Like people find a way. If you like football, you find a way.
This is highly personal for me because the way I fell in love with this sport was watching a 1AA school in Georgia Southern, who I would argue right now, you're talking about why should North Dakota State move up? Look, I'm looking at the ROI on when Georgia Southern transitioned up. It's not really there, to be honest. And yeah, they've gone to a couple bowl games and they beat Nebraska, but the passion and the joy and the fandom in the FCS is great. There's no slight against that. Look at what Idaho has done. Idaho's a great success story, Andy, I think, in understanding your level and understanding where you should be. And that's why I've actually kind of cheered on the big monolithic entities in this sport by saying, hey, if I'm Alabama, why are you holding me to the same NCAA standards as ULM down I-20, who has a single percentage of my budget? We're not the same thing. We have different concerns. And if anything, I feel like we've got to accelerate. Maybe it's a more of a diversification of tiers and classifications so that there is more relevance for some of these schools. But the MAC
I don't think there needs to be more diversification. I think some of these MAC schools and some of these Sun Belt schools should play in the FCS. They belong there. They would be competitive,
and I would be fine
there.
with that. Yeah, I would be fine with that. I understand the financial ramifications, but I also, I joked about this last week. I do know a lot of people at Louisiana Monroe who have held on by the skin of their fingertips to the financial requirements necessary to be a Division I program. And honestly, I've talked about moving down before multiple times. There's no shame in that. There's trying to stay on so you can be a perpetual paycheck game for Alabama and Florida State, and starting a football season losing by 70 points 3 times before you get into conference play, that system's, it's not going to happen anymore.
You mean Kent State?
Kent State and
Kent
Akron.
State will still find those payday games. They find the work. They just beat the crap out of their team every year and give them no chance when MAC play starts.
Andy, when you visit a campus, and I know you've done this more than I have. I've done it 100 odd times at least. But you visit a campus, what the first thing they do is they show you around the building, right? Or they want to show you something, okay?
Yeah.
Everywhere you go. I went to Kent State when Sean Lewis was there. And I knew a couple of the assistants on staff from previous gigs, and I was shocked. I was absolutely floored that a Division I football program is running with those facilities. I'm not a pro construction guy. I'm a pro player guy. Okay. I'm not saying you should dump all your money into facilities, but the idea that Kent State is operating at the same level as Ohio State is absolutely insane. And it's I think it's to their own detriment. So we're going to watch some of these teams fall and break, and it's just it's an ugly time right now at a part of this sport that I've always celebrated and thought was great. But some of these rosters that are being trotted out to lose by 70 are only going to get worse and worse.
Yeah, and there is a solution. We just mentioned it. So people have to put aside their pride and accept reality on reality's terms, and we'll see if that can happen. But yeah. I do think that's probably where it's headed, and you know, I don't think that's a problem, because I think there were a lot of programs that were in the FBS that did not need to be in the FBS.
I want to be super clear, and I think you'll agree with me. I am not advocating for some sort of separation that prevents, like, I celebrated when that 12 slot came open. I know it's not officially called the 12 slot. Like, if you're listening to this and you're a fan of South Florida, Fresno, Boise, like I am.
We're not talking about your school either.
No, I want to be 110% clear. The money that like San Diego State has, like, that's not what I'm just, it's not one league. Okay. And by the way, I know I talked about the MAC. Toledo operates very differently than Kent State and Akron.
Like Toledo belongs in the FBS because they put the effort into being a member of the FBS. They don't just say, we're going to go play Oklahoma and Florida State in the same year, get our doors blown off, take their money, and not reinvest it. Like, Toledo actually invests the money.
No, so, I do this thing every year where I do the anonymous coach scouting reports for those preview magazines. I've done it for years. How many years am I going to have to do this where I'm like, all right, I call up 3 guys I know in the region. I say, what can you tell me about UMass? And it gets to the point where they're like, what in the world could I say about you? They shouldn't be here. That's what I get. I need a 350-word blurb, and I get 4 guys on the phone going, are you kidding me? That's where there's a break. And they're one of 133, 136 teams, whatever it is. So,
well, hopefully some of these programs will take a hard look in the mirror, figure it out. And I think maybe the drying up of certain payday games might help accelerate that process, because I think the payday games are going to continue to dry up because TV likes good games. Viewers like good games. And there's going to be more of a premium paid for good games going forward. So, yeah, I again, I don't want people to feel bad because their program's not in the FBS anymore, but you actually may enjoy it more when your team isn't getting beat by 70.
To go back to Oregon State for a second, there are casualties of war and what's going on in the separation of college football. It's going to take specific programs and hurt them. Oregon State didn't deserve this. It was the Pac-12's fault. We could probably, Andy, we could do a whole episode on, if I'm an Oregon State fan and I love college football.
Who killed the Beavers?
Yeah, like, and I remember, the Rogers brothers upsetting USC, or whatever great memory you have, and you should. You have a legitimate complaint with this sport and its organization and structure and TV networks. We're also not talking about you. I want to be clear about that too. Like, Wazoo and Oregon State are fighting a good fight right now, but it's impossible.
They'll be fine in the new Pac-12. A lot of their issues right now have to do with a lot of their issues have to do right now with them not really being in a conference and them fighting the Mountain West because of what they did in their reorganization of the Pac-12. So I think that they'll get that figured out. But yeah, it's going to be a bumpy road for a lot of these programs over the next few years. So not to end on a downer, but that's just the truth.
I got a call last week from someone saying like, oh yeah, I don't normally share this kind of stuff with this level of transparency, but they're like, hey, you should watch out, Trent Bray at Oregon State, that might open. And I'm thinking, why? What are you're going to go out into the coaching market? You're going to go out into the market right now? And you're going to say this guy wasn't good enough with like both hands tied behind his back? Like, give me a break.
Yeah, they're in a tough spot. But again, I think that will get better once the new Pac-12 rises up next year. But we're going to have to say, because this is a crazy period of transition for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so a lot of weird stuff's going to happen over the next few years. Hopefully we can help prepare you for it on this show and give you an idea of where things are headed. But in some cases, it's not going to be pleasant. So we will see what happens down the road. Keep an eye on some of these programs. Godfrey, when we come back on Thursday, you mentioned Oregon State. Let's just
yes, sir.
We'll head down, from Benton County to Lane County.
Nice.
We're going to be talking the Ducks against the Hoosiers. Indiana's chance to legitimize itself, even though I think if you watch Indiana, the Hoosiers are legit. But for the people who don't watch, who box score watch, this is a massive opportunity for Indiana as they go to Oregon. We'll talk about that game. We'll talk about Ohio State, Illinois, the Buckeyes. So boring because they're so great. We'll talk about all of that on Thursday's edition of the College Football Enquirer. Talk to you then.